Oh, I guess that means it's time to start. Untitled Rob Ininaatig Dibaajimowinan, Philadelphia and Dujaba, Anishinaabe and Glifwick and Denoki. Welcome everybody. My name is Rob Crowe. I'm the Climate Change Program Coordinator for the Great Lakes Indian Fish and Wildlife Commission. I'm also a member of the Tribal Adaptation Menu team. I just wanted to start off by welcoming everyone and saying a little bit about why we're here and our the Ininaatig working group. So kind of the motivation for this event started last year at a meeting between a number of the Glifwick member tribes and the Forest Service, when one of our panelists, Marvin Defoe, asked a question about what's going to happen in Anishinaabe country if climate change causes us to lose our sugar maple, or if it changes the way sugaring season happens to the point where that tradition is in jeopardy. And he asked specifically about whether we should be planting red maple or some other kind of trees to help make up for that. And myself and Chris Swanston, who at the time was the director of the Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, kind of started turning that question around in our brains. And we did what we always do, which is reach out to our friends. And that included, there's some of us from the Tribal Adaptation Menu team and folks from WCAC and the other partners. And we wanted to think about what would happen and how would we adapt to a change like that. And our group got bigger and our thoughts got bigger. And we started thinking about things that we'll probably talk about tonight, like an international maple conference to bring together sugarers and scientists and native people and non-native people, all who care about sugar maple and all who want to kind of guide research to develop adaptation plans so that we can keep that tradition alive. And then we realized that we were thinking really big and we didn't have the time or the money to do a big conference like that right off the bat. So then we turned to the adaptation menu, and the first strategy and approach in the adaptation menu is to consult your elders and your knowledge holders and the community and ask for guidance that way. And so that was the idea behind this event tonight. That's all I'm going to say for tonight. Miigwech Miu. I'll turn it over to Hannah to talk a little bit more about the event and our partnership.
Bonjour, everybody. Hannah Ponchi, Indigenous, Eagle River, Wisconsin, and Dunjaba, Ironwood, Michigan, Inda, Glifwick and Denoki, going into Dudamasi. My name is Hannah Ponchi. I'm a scientist in the climate change program at Glifwick. And I'm just going to give a little bit more information about how the night will go. And then we want to get right into the speakers. So a little bit more information about our group. You probably saw the logos in that slick little intro that Nick put together for us. But we have members from across the range of Ininaatig, 1854 Treaty Authority, Wisconsin Tribal Conservation Advisory Council, Natural Resources Conservation Service, University of Wisconsin Extension, Glifwick, College of Menominee Nation, Northern Institute of Applied Climate Science, Dynamite Hill Farms, Bay Mills Indian Community, and United South and Eastern Tribes. I think that's everybody. So thanks to our whole team in pulling this session together. It was a group effort. Everyone contributed ideas and enthusiasm and different perspectives. So like Rob said, hopefully this session is just the start of our work on Ininaatig. Hopefully we can work towards hosting a bigger conference or something like that where more knowledge can be shared. So stay tuned. And so miigwech to all of you. Thank you for coming. We had over 600 people registered for tonight, which just shows how important this being is to so many people. So it looked like to me, we had people from, the Midwest, the Northeast parts of Canada, some from out West too. So take a moment right now just to throw where you're tuning in from in the chat so we can see where everybody's calling in from, zooming in from. And so I'm just going to go over a few things for our Zoom session and hand it over. So as Marnie mentioned in the email you all received, we're using Zoom and Facebook Live. If you're on Zoom and something happens to your internet connection and you need to leave the meeting and you can't get back in, that's because we have a limit on the number of people that can join the Zoom. So head over to 1854 Treaty Authority's Facebook page where it's being live streamed as well. And you'll catch it there. And we'll be able to monitor comments from both of those. So if you are in Zoom, please keep yourself on mute so we can hear the speakers. I know some people are less familiar with the technology, so the mute button's on the lower left. There's a little microphone there. So if you have comments or want to thank presenters during the session, feel free to throw those in the chat or the comments on Facebook Live. If you have questions for the presenters, please hold those until the end. We'll have a little bit of a question and answer session. You can raise your hand and ask your question then, or type your question in the chat on Facebook. But we can go over that when we get there. We are recording the session with the exception of the invocation. So we'll post the recording on 1854 Treaty Authority's Facebook page after the event. And the last thing is we did not set an end time for this session on purpose. It will go as long as it needs to go, and we want to give all of our presenters the time to speak. We know a lot of you have families and other things going on, so it's perfectly okay to leave and come back, but we hope you can join us for the whole time. So now I'm going to introduce Marnie Keski. She's the Cultural Preservation Specialist at 1854 Treaty Authority. As Rob mentioned, last year we were trying to decide what to do, exactly what we could do with our capacity, and we came to Marnie and asked if we could collaborate, and she totally came to our rescue. She did most of the work planning this session. She designed those amazing flyers that you've seen on Facebook, did all the advertising and contacting everybody, and thought of every little detail. So Marnie is the reason we're here tonight. Miigwech Marnie, we really appreciate it. And we're just looking forward to hearing from everybody tonight. So welcome and take it away, Marnie.
Miigwech? Yeah, I don't know if I give myself that many accolades. No, I'm just honored to have an opportunity to run 1854's education outreach program, where we had established a pretty good virtual program over the last year, over the COVID pandemic, and we were able to reach a lot of people. So we were kind of searching for themes this year, and our climate change specialist came to me and said, hey, would you be able to kind of do the background work to get this thing going? Because we don't really have the staff capacity. So I'm like, sure, let's do it. It's been really amazing. So I want to start by saying, give it a shout out to Nicholas, who's handling all of our technology tonight out of the College of Menominee Nation with the Sustainable Development Institute. He has been a lifesaver for all those technological things that just aren't happening in here. So also incredibly honored to have Jerry and Katie here from Dynamite Hill Farms. I want to give them I want to give them their due introduction. So Zigwanakwe, Katie Brissett, is of the Loon clan and a member of the Red Cliff Band of Ojibwe, Lake Superior Ojibwe. Zigwanakwe has lived and worked in various Ojibwe communities as an educator, ensuring that traditional teachings are passed on in a good way. Kiriga Bijou, Jerry Johnro, comes from a long line of sugar makers in Weequahdon, or the Keweenaw Bay Indian community. Jerry began working with his tribe's natural resources department as a technician and has been involved in the responsibility of developing strong relationships to the beings on the landscape ever since. Currently, Katie and Jerry and their children now reside in northern Michigan, exploring Ojibwe food and life ways as the owners and operators of Dynamite Hill Farms. They hope to help revive local Ojibwe economies and understandings through the distribution of traditional Ojibwe food and the stories and teachings that come with this food. Dynamite Hill Farms looks forward to helping people from all walks of life relearn what it means to live within and from a place again. And I totally forgot to give my introduction to you guys, so I will say, Marnie Indijnikas, Gawin and Dodo Damislin, Onagamin Singh, and Giguzi Means and Dujaba, 1854 Treaty Authority, and Nanoki, Miigwech, meet you. Take it away, Jerry and Katie.
Okay, I'm terrified now that there's so many people watching. That's crazy, but I'm really happy that there's a lot of people interested in this subject. So my introduction is Giddigabaju, Nindijinikas, Jijak and Dudam, Wikwaedonk and Dojaban, Ojibwe and Anishinaabe, Nini and Dao. So I am Jerry Jandro. Katie and I are owners and operators here at Dynamite Hill Farms. We're casting from our living room, and we have Kathy Smith, one of our community members that's kind of kicking it with us today. She'll be providing background commentary and poking fun when our microphone's off. But I'm really excited about this opportunity. I know we've been talking about this for quite some time, and for me, sugar maple has been one of those trees that has just I've always gravitated towards sugar maple. And over the years, as I've developed my relationship with sugar maple, I've become to appreciate it even more so. So here on our house or in our farm here, we're actually on the reservation, but we own 30 acres here. We have about 730 taps that we put out. Well, that's what we did last year. We may even bump that up to about 800 this year, depending on the conditions, and as long as we have the capacity to handle that much sap. We focus mainly on maple sugar, so the granulated version of maple products. So that's more of the traditional approach. There's maple sugar. There's also maple cakes that we made way back in the day. We do make maple syrup as well. People always want their syrup too, so we bottle some syrup, and we're also fermenting our maple syrup, and we're making maple vinegars. And we actually recently just tried infusing Michigan blueberries into some of our maple vinegar, and it's delicious. It's like almost good to drink just straight up. But so we're really just trying to get back to the land, getting back to our responsibilities to this place. And our business approach is really not about maximizing profits necessarily. We just want to create a sustainable lifestyle for our family and get our children involved. I mean, together we have how many kids now?
I think there's 7.
I think there's 7. There might be another one crawling around somewhere and no one knows, but yeah, we want our kids to be involved with this stuff too, and sort of normalize this way of life again, and normalize those relationships with this place that we call home. And I think one thing I wanted to share with you all before we get into the panelists was, something that I sort of realized in my progression in my relationship with sugar maple. I've come to appreciate it at all stages of its life, really. I don't just know sugar maple during the sugar season. So throughout my life, and even as my previous profession as a forester, I've always had an affinity for sugar maple, and just how it can persist so long in the understory. It's a very shade tolerant species, and where we are here in the Western Upper Peninsula, where our reservation is, still has the most dense sugar maple stands in the world. And that's been historically true as well. So if you go back to 1865, my community, the Keweenaw Indian community, we produced over 450,000 pounds of maple sugar in one season. It's a sort of mind-blowing when you think about the amount of work that it takes to produce that much sugar. I mean, this last year, I think I don't know how many gallons we made. We made like 120 gallons of syrup or something like that. And I was whooped, right? And going back to the 1800s, our community was kicking over 400,000 pounds of sugar out. And so that is a sort of testament to our abilities, our knowledge, our work ethic, which is contradictory to sort of the narrative that gets pushed about Native people as being lazy. I mean, that's not true. So this entire economy, this maple industry that's worth multiple millions of dollars is Anishinaabe. That's our economy. It's who we are. Our sugar that we made, this is pre-colonization, went all over the country. Our trade networks were massive. Our sugars went south. You could take the Mississippi River all the way down to the Gulf of Mexico. You could take the St. Lawrence Seaway out from the Great Lakes area here, and you can hit the East Coast. There's the Snake River that heads west, and then you can take the Rainy Lake system all the way up until Hudson Bay in the north. And I can guarantee you that our sugar made it all the way throughout Turtle Island here. It's such an amazing food. It's such an amazing gift. But with that being said, I did want to share a little bit about sort of my some thoughts that I've had about sugar maple during these times, and as I've learned and interacted. I appreciate sugar maple, as their babies and as their small little seedlings that basically carpet the forest floor here, and their ability to persist in low light levels. And then when they get the opportunity, they take advantage of those gaps in the canopy. And then as they get a little bit bigger, I also know them as our lodgepoles. And so we construct our lodges here with sugar maple, about 2-3 inches in diameter, depending on what we're trying to build here. And they provide housing for us. As they get a little bit bigger, I've had the pleasure of working with some people that know medicines, and I know that there are differences within the sugar maple species itself that actually provide medicines for our people. As those trees mature and get larger, when they get big enough to actually start sharing some of their sap with us, they'll provide us with sap for literally hundreds of years. A sugar maple tree can live 400 years in an ideal and suitable habitat, and that entire time it's sharing that sap with us. Also, as Anishinaabe people, even from our migration stories coming from the East Coast and heading west here, that entire migration, we were going through Maple Nation as well. And so the sugar maple tree has really been a part of our people, and it's been taking care of our people for thousands and thousands of years. And so I want to acknowledge that and let people know how much I appreciate that. Even after the tree dies, we can use the sugar maple for firewood, so it'll keep us warm. That's primarily what we burn here. It's so plentiful around here, and it's a really good firewood. It's a good heat. But even the logs that fall down in the woods, they become the substrate for mushrooms. And so we have several sugar maple trees that have blown down in the backyard there. And this last year, I think we had 3 or 4 flushes of oyster mushrooms that we harvested from those logs. So even when they're no longer alive, they're still providing. Their bodies are still providing for our people. And then even after that, even after they've been burnt and as firewood and stuff like that, those hardwood ashes, we use those for the nixtamalization process for our corn. So when we're processing flint corn and stuff like that, when we want to get down to the hominy, we'll boil that corn in hardwood ash, and we use sugar maple ash for that. And so even its ashes are still taking care of our people. And it wasn't until recently when I started stitching all those things together, and it's just it fills my heart that that this species, this being, this tree, is so good at taking care of us. And I'll leave it at that. And maybe we'll have some more conversations later on once the panelists get going. But I just want to say miigwech for having this opportunity to share with everyone. Thanks for everyone that helped put this on. And I'm going to pass this over to Zigwanekwe, and she'll take it from there. So miigwech.
Miga Japiche Pujuka Kinawia, Mangidote, Miss Kobikong and Dunjiba. Makunte Bun and Baba Bun and Schnabe when the Kaza Bun means says even equate in the Shnakas. Oday Wenjabayan. Gina Nagana Windan, a Nujiko Geko, Ga Onje and Shinabe and Nadazian. Miso ga baba miso ga onje baba yayan megwa nanda waban daman o minu bema disiwin and to go a year gig kinda now and el kidwin minu bema disiwin miso ga onje dananakian ma michiko mewa kink nungum and I don't know if you guys can hear our little ones in the background. So hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is, I'm known as Iguinique. Katie Brzett is, what the government folks call me. And I'm originally from Redcliffe, and I've spent much of my life kind of wandering around Anishinaabe King, learning how to be a real good Ojibwe lady, right? Learning what it's like to be in our places where the waters are plentiful, in our places where the people are plentiful, in our places where the mosquitoes are plentiful, all the way up there in Shaganashio King, right? Up in Canada, man, I ain't never seen mosquitoes like that before. But one of the things that I've always been seeking and looking and trying to understand better is like what it means to be from here, from Anishinaabe King, from Ojibwe country. And in that search and in that quest, I was so grateful. I've had so many wonderful opportunities to meet and learn from so many folks. And as I've gone these places, I've gotten a lot of opportunities to spend time in the language. I'll be introducing a good friend of mine here soon, a teacher and a helper in our communities. And so many folks who have provided that opportunity to learn what does it mean to be from this place, right? What does it mean to be Anishinaabe? What does it mean to hear and to listen? I think of a story. Sometimes I had a good friend who was like, yeah, non-native friend of ours who does good work, works really hard and helps us. And I remember her asking us, like, I always hear about like how like the Indians and you guys talk about hearing the animals and the trees. And she's like, I don't hear them. And I said, I'm not sure that's true. I think you hear them a lot. And I think you hear them a lot more than you understand. Maybe you just don't understand what you're seeing sometimes or hearing. And she was an advocate and still is an advocate for the trees and for the natural places and for learning here on this on Anishinaabe King Ojibwe territory. And I told her, a lot of us are out here learning in that way. And when a tree asks what it needs from you, whether it shows you through its crown or through its roots or through its bark or the ground itself or the water themselves, like all the places here, they speak and they speak in different ways. And it's just, maybe we don't spend as much time really understanding ourselves in that place anymore. Jerry says that often, like there's so many things out there that are trying to teach us these days. And we don't spend our time in the classroom anymore, right? Because we're too busy in our actual classrooms and in our offices and where we are. And so I say that in a very long and roundabout way, because that's how I talk, to say that, that's how I wound up here in Michigan. I was spending my time learning how to be in Anishinaabe all over, wandering around, learning what it meant to be with the rice and all over. And here I come and I always tease Jerry. I said, I met you and I really liked you. We got some good music. We had some good times. And then I met your trees and I don't think I can leave now. So it's kind of a joke, but it was like the first day I ever even came to visit him. And I was like, oh yeah, you're right. I love these trees and they're amazing. And we're fortunate, right? We're really lucky in what we have here because we're able to take us and our children and our family and friends and anyone who would wants to learn a little more. We're able to take them in these places and to bring them around and to show them, look what you can see. Do you want to spend time in this place again? And so this conversation started for us and for a lot of folks who've been planning this for years and years. We've been talking about this, I think, and this past year, I think Barney kind of brought it up. You know, we've had so many awesome like virtual opportunities where we can gather and connect across what is all of Anishinaabe looking, right? From here to the East Coast, the West Coast, all the way up north, down south, all the places where the sugar used to travel. We can now connect in those ways and actually have this conversation with, you know, all of you here tonight even. And that is such a blessing as we think about it, to be able to share stories in a way that maybe we haven't shared stories in such a long time. And so as we were having this conversation even a year ago and thinking, you know, what do we do? How do we bring this together? Because there's more to the old stories than just that they were stories, right? They are history, but there's also more to who we are than just this past existence of who we used to be. We're dead people if it's only about what we used to do. And it's the vibrancy and the life that we all bring to this conversation here today. And it has just as much to do with evaporators and saplines as it does to you know, our tobacco, our sema, and the money dug and the stories behind it. And so that's a lot of the intentions as to kind of why we came to the point that we are now, sharing these conversations with everyone. And we wanted to extend this conversation out to all of you who maybe wanted to be a part of it, but didn't quite know how, or were interested, but didn't know how do I be a part of this? I want to know more and I want to be a part of things. And so this is hopefully just the beginning of some of new conversations and future conversations. And we're really fortunate. We're going to have a lot of really great speakers and a lot of wonderful people who have powerful and wonderful knowledge to share with us. And so we're really grateful for all of you who have come to join us and share your stories, to listen and participate. If you can stay on. If you have to jump off and put the babes to bed, probably we'll still be talking. So jump back on, and maybe you got to get on Facebook Live if you're on don't lose your spot on Zoom. But we really appreciate everyone being here, and we're going to start the evening out today with a really good friend of mine, someone who I've known for basically most of my journey, coming back home and finding myself again here on Anishinaabe King. Give me one, Ininaatig, Dustin Burnett. Dustin is supposed to have a paper to read about his introduction, and I'm gonna just make it up because that's I love you. Give me one.
Really good friend, and
He's
I don't
a
know
really
anything
great friend.
about
I
him.
didn't want to. So he is. Thank you. This is my official reading, and then I'll talk to you guys about the real stories behind it. Right. Give me one is the executive director of the Midwest Indigenous Immersion Network. He's a former Ojibwe language immersion instructor, and he now spends his time teaching adults writing for Rosetta Stone and directing the Indigenous Immersion Network. I've known Dustin. We went to college together, graduated together. We worked together down in the immersion program down in Hayward. We spent time in ceremonies together. He's a wonderful, wonderful friend of mine, and we am really looking forward to introducing you all tonight. Dustin's going to share with everyone a story about an old time story, Atazukan, about Ininaatig, about the maple tree, and just to kind of help set that stage, to help us think about what it is where we came from, right? So that we can continue that travel and that conversation as we walk forward. And then after Gimiwan is done sharing with us that story, he is going to then we'll jump back on. Jerry and I'll jump back on, and we're going to introduce you each to the panelists who will share with you their own adventures, their own stories, maybe some of their methods, and just whatever it is that they want to bring to this conversation. And then after we've gotten through all of that, we're going to be opening up to some questions, and we will be able to answer questions from those of you who are visiting with us on Facebook. You can type those questions in, and we've got moderators who are going to be able to bring that over, and we'll be able to ask them for you. And yeah, so that's kind of about what it's going to look like this evening. And
Anything about the like purpose of the stories and like the sacredness
yeah.
and stuff like that too?
So with the Adazukanag and the Dibaajimowinan, though, so there's two different ways that you can talk about stories themselves. So Dibaajimowinan are the ones, there are everyday stories, right? And our Adazukan are stories that we as Anishinaabe people, they have life within them, is kind of the best way to describe it, right? We treat them as if they are a being, the same way we would talk with our tobacco or with our fellow Anishinaabe, the Ininaatig, the tree itself. And so we are actually not going to be recording that part, just so everybody knows. And then the differences in those is that there are some protocols. As Anishinaabe people, we have protocols that we bring along with them. And I had already, we asked, give me one with tobacco, and we asked with to share something that helps bring and breathe life back into who we are, right? When we call those stories forward, when we bring the ones that have the life, that carry that, that life comes forward with it, right? And we're able to participate in that existence. And I was told by so many of our wonderful helpers that the stories, it's very intentional that we should hear these stories. And maybe you've heard this story from another speaker, maybe you've heard this story before in your life, or maybe you'll hear it again. And that's very intentional. I was told a couple of things about that, just that when these stories are given to us, we understand them based upon where we are in our lives at that time. I remember Mikize, one of our teachers back when we were working at the immersion school, was always reminding me and the kids. I worked with the 6th grade kids, and he was always reminding us, you're growing up when you can stay awake through the whole story. So everybody who gets to stay awake through this whole first part, you guys are doing a really good job. Wearing your big boy pants and your big girl pants, doing a good job tonight. But those stories are really important, and it's well, I asked Gimme One to speak for the story itself tonight, so he'll share with us. He'll just speak a little bit right away, and then Shnabemwen to bring in the as a way to talk. We want to honor and respect the Manidug who come with each story, and so he'll speak to that. And we're not really going to translate that. He's just going to talk to them and explain our intentions here and why it is we've asked them to come and participate in this with us. And then he'll share this story in the language itself, and then he'll translate for all of you, so that maybe those of you who are still, learning our ways or haven't participated in Shnabemwen yet can understand a little better how that story is told. And so as you go through that, just kind of sit back, listen, get told, hear the things that you really be open to what it is that you're going to be hearing tonight. And then when we're done with that, we'll have some more conversations and actually bring it back to all of you again, I think. Yeah.
Back to the panel.
Yeah. So Jerry and I'll jump back on here in a little bit, and we'll be back and forth. And if you have any questions for us, I'm watching our chat box over here, and we've got lots of folks helping us out here tonight. So Miigwe Chapaje, thank you for all of you to come. And Mama Azibi Washan, this is our newest little one. We found one of our kiddos today.
Behind the couch.
Give me one, gonna budge ginitum. Miigwe.
How Miigwe for that impromptu intro.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was awesome. I've heard some similar stories to that too. I love hearing those old stories that talk about how much all these beings around us pity us as human beings. And like I said, those trees have been taking care of us since that story was told, all the way up into today. and these kids. I think with that though, we're gonna go ahead and start getting the panelists on, and so we're not going too late. And you want to introduce
Yeah.
Marvin?
So first panelist we have tonight, we're gonna have Marvin Defoe. He's an elder from my community back home in Redcliffe Band of the Superior Ojibwe. He runs our TIPO department over there. He's the vice chair of the White Intertribal Task Force, a harvester, makes does a lot of wonderful work with the birch bark, making canoes, has a lot of really great knowledge. We're a little pitiful over there in Redcliffe, and so there's few of us that who hold a lot of that knowledge still. And so we've been really grateful to have Marvin there. And he is actually one of the first people who taught me how to sugar. He's been working with our schools in our community since we were all little kids. And he has been a big help in making sure that that knowledge has been passed on from the little bitty ones, even this size. We've had all our little babies out there, and Marvin and his wife Crystal have been helping us, and then on and on and on. So Marvin, Jerry and I will step back, and it is your turn to jump on and share with us some of your tales. Be careful, all of you.
Yeah, at me Gwitch. I'm so pleased to be here. As Katie indicated, Marvin Defoe. I live on the South Shore, Lake Superior, tribe Redcliffe. My Shinabe name Shigwe Benes, and my true name is Kite Name Sturgeon. And there's also somebody else here sponsoring this event, and that's our ancestors. I want to acknowledge our ancestor, acknowledge, that tree. I kind of feel them around here. Well, me today sitting here, and I'm so amazed at the number of participants. Certainly willing to listen in, talk about the maple tree, the sugar bush, the sugaring. I mean, this is great. So I'd like to also say Chimigwitch to all the organizers, Rob with Cliffwick and Marnie with 54 Authority, and I still have 54 Authority hat here that was given to me 3 years ago, and I'm still wearing it. It's a pretty good hat. It doesn't wear out too good. It's a pretty good hat. I really like it. So Miigwech, Marnie. I come here today with no agenda. I speak what comes to me, what some of my thoughts might be, and have tobacco here too. Let the tobacco set the agenda for this evening. But I can't help but think, kind of how I started sugaring. My grandpa, his name was Lawrence Butterfield. He had a sugar bush where I grew up. Sugar bush. He had a sugar bush. He didn't have a big one, but every year he had to tap them trees, and he had to have syrup. And one thing I noticed is there's so many people here. You guys must all like pancakes, and syrup. And my grandpa, he loved pancakes. He would eat pancakes every goddamn day with that syrup. He loved it. He just loved it. So I used to help my grandpa tap the trees and help haul the sap, and kind of hung around. Young kid, 12 years old, young, hung around with my grandpa. So you always Nakanamawa and try to give credit to who started you off in life down that path. And I credit my grandpa. I credit him. He was also an excellent snowshoe maker. He could make snowshoes. So after you know, he'd use the snowshoes that he made to go walk on the snow. He had a special kind of snowshoes, made it. And when my grandpa passed away, when he passed away, all these things, there's one thing that I wanted from my grandpa, and that was his ladle. His ladle he used to dip. His ladle, I tell you what, that ladle must have been around for 50, 60 years because he had it all wound up at the hand, put a little wooden handle on, little metal ladle, and dents all in it. So I can imagine my grandpa every spring would pull out his ladle, you know, pull out his ladle. And that's one thing that I really treasure the most from my grandfather, that little ladle. That's a ladle that I like to use. And he also taught me, you know, different thing. I'd ask him, I'd say, how the heck do you know when them trees are ready? How the heck do you know when them trees are ready to tap, or, you know, what comes around? And he told me, and that was with my friend, he said that meme would come around. That meme would tell him when it's kind of coming around, kind of get ready, kind of get your stuff ready, you know, get ready. That meme would tell my grandpa that. So just today, guess what I seen? I seen that meme. Holy cripes, that meme flew just close to me. What? I don't know if it was my grandpa flying close to me or what, but telling me to start getting ready. So my mind, I'm already thinking, you know, getting ready for sugar bush. In fact, I started thinking about getting ready for sugar bush last year or last fall. I don't like getting firewood in this when the snow is about 7 feet deep. I don't like getting wood for your sugar bush, you know. So I kind of think ahead a little bit, getting ready. So I always try to have some wood ready in the fall time for the, you know, for the spring. Because I've done that. I've been, oh man, I need some more wood. You go out, have to go out with your toboggan. And I see Bruce Savage kind of chuckling too. He probably did the same thing. You know, going out, getting your wood. You know, it's a lot of work. It's a lot of work doing that. Sugar bushing is a lot of work. You know, it's a tremendous amount of work, but it's kind of work that I really enjoy. I really enjoy it. So it's just like, you know, you get little signs, you know, we're very seasonal people. There's little signs that we get. And it's kind of like in the spring when the fish start spawning. What is that animal that starts chirping? Omakiki. Omakiki will start chirping. And I live out in the woods here in Red Cliff. And I listen to that frog behind my house. He starts chirping. When he starts reaching a certain pitch, I know that lake is ready, about an hour drive from me, ready to spawn. So there's little signals that you learn in your lifetime through the wood, you know, when you're doing this sort of thing. All trees are sacred. All the resources are. You know, there's uses for a lot of different trees and so forth. I mean, I like building my wigwams out of ironwood. I know you mentioned maple, but ironwood is a very good tree for you know, for wigwams. I'm a birch bark canoe builder. Build birch bark canoes. I probably spend half of my days in the woods looking around. It's almost like I kind of look at it as like a Anishinaabe Walmart, you know. Anishinaabe Walmart, you go out there, that's the resources. And that's why I talk about our ancestors, acknowledge them, because they thought of us years ago for our generation to be able to keep going, to be able to have the resources able to keep going. So I'm talking about ceded territory treaty rights. You know, different. It's not just the resources that I have here in Red Cliff, but it's the resources within the ceded territory. And I go out there looking around for a lot of different things. Bark. I mean, I've seen some places way out, like Jerry mentioned, Michigan. You're right, Jerry. Over in Michigan, there, man, those are some really excellent hardwoods over there. And there's different places, you know, that have those trees. That, man, if I was over here, man, this would be a good spot to have a sugar bush. You know, good spot to have one. But in 50 years, you know, since I've been boiling sap, you know, I noticed changes made. You know, when I was younger, 14, helping my grandpa, 12 years old, you know, you can almost, all right, here comes that bird. All right, here we go. We're gonna tap these trees. You can almost expect maybe a month. You know, I remember when I was younger, you know, you go so goddamn long, man, I wish this sap would quit running right now. I'm kind of getting tired, you know. But but I'm noticing changes in that. And I remember one time, not too long ago, maybe 7 years ago or something, I could not believe it. The trees started running, tapping the trees, sap coming in one day, second day, then on the third day, holy crap, it was 80 degrees out. It was 80 degrees, and I was collecting sap in my shorts. I don't know if anybody remember. It wasn't too long ago, maybe 10 years ago, even 9, 10 years ago, somewhere around that. And that's right what Dustin said in that story right away. It didn't take long. 4 or 5 days, that sap turned yellow. You know, turned yellow. And yeah, I started to worry. You know, I started to worry about how in the heck how are we going to keep sugaring? Is there enough people doing the sugaring? I mean, here in Red Cliff, there's a number of families that have a sugar bush right here in Red Cliff. Probably one of the oldest families, well, not the oldest families, but that I remember, the Nawago. Nawago family, old friend Mike Nawago, Sammy Nawago. There's a place there where their family has had a sugar bush for years, and even talking from Red Cliff here, they'd have to walk out to Raspberry. It wasn't a road. Had to walk out there where them trees are, and they camped right up there, had a little place in the woods. And that was years and years and years, way longer than I've done sugaring, sugar bush. Today, that sugar bush is still going. It's still going. That family is still going out there, still doing that maple sugaring out there. Last year we had some equipment, I guess, taps and pails and this and that. Last year there was 10 families that came and got the equipment, and they tapped the trees on for their own family. You know, for their own family, they tapped them trees. Katie mentioned I did some work with the Head Start, because my son Talon, who was holy cripes, he must have been in pre-kindergarten there in the Head Start, 3 years old. I made a conscious effort. I said, I'm gonna work with them kids. I'm gonna work with them kids in his class. And we're gonna do a number of things. We went fishing and stuff, whatever, but when the spring came, we did a sugar bush with them kids. So they got these old coffee cans, coffee can. That's how I started having coffee cans, putting coffee cans out. So the kids had their own coffee can. They put their name on there. Maybe they put their clan or whatever, went out and tapped trees. Brought all the kids out. Pretty soon become 4 years old at the Head Start here in Red Cliff. And they kind of made a conscious decision, the Head Start did, is they shut down the Head Start. So all the families are gonna go out in the sugar bush. That's gonna be our school. We're gonna all go out in the sugar bush. And that's what they did. Shut the school down. All the families, the parents and the kids all went out to the sugar bush and tapped the trees and this and that we had over 65 families. I remember that day, man, that was one of the best days of my life, seeing all this out in the sugar bush, working with the kids. The next year, guess what? Did it again. Did it again. So I worked with them kids when they were from there all the way up to their senior year. Every year they go and tap the trees. Every year they would go and some way or another, go out there and tap the trees. So when they were seniors, we're all ready to go out and tap the trees. Their final hurrah, that darn COVID hit. Darn right, COVID hit, and they couldn't do it. They couldn't go out and do it. So my thinking is the trees changing? Is the climate changing? We all know it is. I built birch bark canoes. I went all around Lake Superior looking at birch bark. All around. Birch trees are dying. Birch trees they're dying. It's changing, they're dying. And I was a little worried about the Ininaatig, the maple. I was a little worried about the maple. Will our sugar maple survive this climate change? Will they survive? Will it survive? I don't know the answer to that. But I hope it does. I hope we take a little closer look at that. And this fall I went with a group of kids, and we planted 3 million birch bark basket seeds. We planted 3 million birch bark basket seeds. That's birch bark, all these little seeds, we planted them. So is there a time to take a look at the other trees, such as the sugar maple? The birch bark, I know this is about sugar bushing, but all trees, but the birch bark is a very sacred tree. It's in our culture. We use it in a lot of different things. So is the maple tree. So is the maple tree. Now, I can only drink so much syrup, but I tell you, one thing I do like is I like that Chisabackwit sugar. I like that sugar. Now, my good buddy, Jeff Savage, I know is on here too. I admire Jeff. He's an elder from Fond du Lac. Every year, you see him boiling sap, boiling sugar, and we're going to hear from Bruce, his brother, on who is a very tremendous, does a lot of work in the sugar bush area too. But it's that sugar. It's that sugar we like. And I'll go every day, grab a spoon of sugar and eat like that. So much sugar, I had to eat that sugar, and I really love it. But what happens that by the springtime, your belly gets bigger. You know, your belly gets bigger. So me and Jeff Savage kind of tease each other. Who ate the most sugar during that winter? You just look at our bellies. And so far, Jeff Savage has me beat. Yeah, he's got me beat by a long shot. But just that little bit, I guess, I just wanted to share with you, you know, a little bit of my experience with it. Zagiawan, you know, I love that maple tree. I love it. I love the woods, and I love people on here are so interested in the nature, so interested in our culture, and so interested in that. And I want to encourage everybody on here, take some time to work with the young people, even if it's one. Maybe it's a classroom. Maybe it's your cousin or your grandchildren or what have you. Take some time and teach them. Because if you teach a child to love the earth, they're going to protect it. If you teach a child to love the earth, they're going to protect it. And I seen this tree touch so many children's lives throughout the years. So many kids, I seen them. They couldn't wait to get back to that tree. And maybe there's a little icicle that comes off of that spot. They're putting their tongue up there, you know, trying to lick that, they're watching the little drops, that life coming out of that tree. They'll put their tongue in there and lick them drops. It's just amazing. So I just want to encourage everybody, spend some time with our young people. And that's what we're going to be doing this spring here in Red Cliff. You know, working with families, touching the trees, showing them how to tap and how to boil. I make sugar, but I'm not the best sugar maker. My wife, Crystal, she makes way better sugar than I do. And I think I kind of wait to it. There's different methods to making that sugar. Some have the tadpole method, where you put in the water and the little tail comes up when it's going to turn sugar, or the ball method, you watch it in the ball. But Krista, when she makes sugar, way better than me, because I'm too impatient. And I say, oh yeah, that's good enough. Then I take it off and go, and all I have is taffy. You know, all I have is taffy there. So so I admit. But another good sugar too, I do have to tell you, Jerry and Katie, your sugar is really good too. You know, I've had some of your sugar, and that's really, really good sugar also. So Miigwech, we got other speakers on here. So I'd like to give some time to all them. Aho, Miigwech.
All right, Miigwech, Marvin, for the beautiful stories. And I see people already responding to what you were saying in the chat. And yeah, I think you're absolutely right. One of the things I wanted to mention here in the break, you know, this talk about climate change and sugar maple, and a lot of the projections are saying that sugar maple is going to be losing its suitable habitat in the future. And some people's knee-jerk reaction to that is, okay, what are we going to replace sugar maple with? And I would just encourage people to just pause and take a break for a little while. One of the things that we don't necessarily understand, even from like the scientific community community is the adaptability of the sugar maple tree. The sugar maple tree has seen a lot more than we have as people, and they have adaptations that we don't even know about. So there's like water use efficiency, and if the carbon dioxide in the atmosphere becomes higher, you know, they can actually close their stomata and they're not losing as much water and things like that. They can slow down their respiration. There's so many things that they can do in response to the changing climate. And so I just want to encourage people to, you know, let's do our best to try and protect this tree. If we know that we're having a negative impact on the sugar maple tree, then we as people need to be adjusting what we do. And we always put this pressure on nature and on the trees and everything around us, but we don't take the responsibility ourselves. And so as someone that recognizes all the gifts that are shared with us, I would strongly suggest that we do whatever we can to try and protect that tree while it's here. And I think one of the ways of doing that, which you mentioned, Marvin, is to get people involved, get those kids involved. Like you said, if you teach those kids to love this place, they'll protect it. And I think that's very true. And so I'm a strong advocate of getting our people back out there and to rebuild those relationships with this place. And when we see something's not right, you know, we can try to do something to help that. So I appreciate those words, Marvin. So we're gonna keep bouncing down the line here with our panel, and I appreciate everyone's patience. And I know it's getting late, but there's good things happening here. So the next panel is actually going to be a trio coming from Untitled. So over on the east end of the Upper Peninsula here, our relatives to the east, also on Lake Superior. We have Wanda Perrin and Paula and Joe Carrick. Wanda was born and raised in Untitled, also known as Bay Mills. She grew up hearing stories of the Anishinaabe sugar bush and knew that it was something that she wanted to do. It has now been over 40 years that she has carried on this tradition. Passing on this knowledge and these teachings to her grandchildren and future generations is something she considers vital to the preservation of the Anishinaabe culture. So a lot of these similar threads that are coming out here tonight. And with that, I guess all three of you can go ahead and unmute, and you can share stories however you wish. So Miigwech.
Miigwech, thank you for that. I've been hearing some really good things on here. Wanda Perrin Indigenous, Naganagijigo Indigo, Ganoje Kani and Donjaba and Ajijak and Dodane. So I am Wanda Perrin, and my spirit name is Naganagijigo. And I am from Ganoje Kani, the place of the pike. And I am Crane Clan. And so I do have my sister Paula, which I'll let her, there she is. And my brother Joe, he's on here too. I asked them to join us too. So we come from a long family. I was born here in Ganoje Kani 73 years ago, and I was raised here. I was actually delivered by our medicine woman, Gachikwe. She delivered me. And growing up, I have 8 brothers and I have 5 sisters, and we actually grew up living off the land. Basically, we gathered from our whole lives. We a lot of what we ate came from the land, so it was very natural for us to harvest. But one of the things we didn't do growing up was have a sugar bush, and that was something that I used to think about. I would hear our elders, our parents and grandparents and elders talk about the sugar bush, that this family had a sugar bush over here, or this family had a sugar bush over there. And I used to wonder about that. And I always thought, when I grow up, I'm going to have a sugar bush. It's something I wanted to do. And but I always wondered too, like, what happened? You know, what happened during that time? There was about 2 or 3 generations where people weren't having sugar bush in our area when it was so traditional for us. You know, I could walk and see places where there were sugar bushes. You could still tell they were there. And so I wondered about that. And I have a theory, and my sister Paula too. we talked about it. And one of the things is the Treaty of 1855, the Allotment Act. And you probably know, but the heads of families after that treaty were given 80 acres of land. And single adults were given 40 acres of land. And this was actually our traditional maple stands. That was the land we were given. And what happened though is they added taxation shortly after that, unbeknownst to our people. And so we lost all the land, and actually the Forest Service now has it. So it's all around us, is our traditional sugar bush land is all around us, no longer belongs to us. So that happened. And another thing happened. We live here on Washki Bay. It's right outside my house here. In Washki Bay, it goes right into the St. Mary's River, which is a great waterway there. So after the War of 1812, when there was a big influx for all of our resources, one of them was trees. And a mill was built right here, right outside the bay right here, and it was a huge mill. And they opened in 1877. So by the time they closed in 1907, the trees were basically gone. We have pictures of homes at that time, and there's only stumps in their yards. There are no trees, just stumps. So they basically left because there were no more trees. They were just completely gone. And that had to have an impact on it. And then another thing happened, and I know you all know about this, are the boarding schools. So the boarding schools took away the children. My grandmother was 6 years old when she went away to boarding school, along with her 6 older siblings, or 5 older siblings and a younger sibling. And she went away to boarding school and didn't come home till she was 21. And I know how important the children were. I have letters. I'm a historian for our tribe. I have been, I worked in the department with my sister as a historian, archivist, and THIPO, Tribal Historic Preservation Officer. History has been my love forever and ever. And I've read a lot of writings from the early church schools or whatever the different denominations. And they would say in the springtime, come March or April, the children disappeared. They were all gone for a month at a time or more, and they went to the sugar bushes. So I know these sugar bushes depended a lot on the children to help run them. I mean, there's so much they can do, from the little ones all the way to the older ones, from cutting the wood to dumping the sap buckets or the McCucks, or putting them back out, or hauling wood, or watching the little ones maybe. So I think these factors, so there was like 2 or 3 generations here that there were no sugar bushes. And so I always was determined that I wanted to do that. And so my sister here is my partner in crime. So we, over 40 years ago, we don't even know how many years, over 40 years ago, we decided, so near our house where we grew up, there was this little place we called the bike trails, and we all rode our bikes in there, and it went down by this little stream, and you could make a circle around and come back up. And there was actually some sugar maples all through that little area. It wasn't a big area. And so her and I, we got some taps, and some of them were even cut copper tubing that we put a little bend in, and we saved our milk jugs, and we tapped those trees. I don't even think, how many did we have, Paula? Did we have 50?
I think it was like 25.
I think it was like 25. Yeah, not many, but we put them out there, and we hung the milk cartons on them, and we collected our sap. And people, I mean, you could see from the road where we tapped, and people would say, oh, who's doing that? You know, and they were interested. People were interested in what we're doing. And then our big old production of boiling it down was, I took the oven rack out of my oven. I didn't know that would ruin it. And I put it on some bricks outside, and we made a fire, and I had my big pot in the middle and a bunch of little pots around the outside. Some of you may have seen it on the site. I've seen some of the pictures on there. And we boiled our first batch of sugar, our maple syrup, out there around the house. And we stayed up sometimes all night boiling it. And all that nice smoke curled back in and got it all dark. And it was just delicious. We loved it. And we didn't have a big sugar bush, but we shared whatever we had with whoever was there and with family. And yeah, I really enjoyed that. Yeah. And then we, did you, Paula, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
Okay, and so then we did that for a while, and after a while we found somebody was selling their actual evaporator. It wasn't big, but we bought it. We went in together, Paula and I, and we bought it. And so now we had a bigger affair. And so we could tap more trees and boil a little bit faster. But always, like I heard from an earlier talker, we always had someone there with us, not just us. We've had elders, we've had the elders come and sit around the fire, and we would make tea out of the sap, which was one of the favorite things. You would have your herbal teas, whatever it may be, and use the boiled sap in it, and they would tell stories. And it was so wonderful to hear that, to hear those stories, and they would laugh. And I remember Marvin said something about the 80-degree day. We had the same experience. We had snowbanks up past our waist, and we're all in shorts and tank tops. It was just unheard of. But yes, we had that same experience. Yeah, and so we've also had kids. Head Start comes in all the time. And now we have Boys and Girls Club here in Bay Mills, and they come in all the time. And they're some of them are a little older, and they actually do the whole thing. They tap the tree, they haul it, they do every stage of it. And then everybody gets to taste them at the end. And we're still not a big sugar bush, but it's just right, I think. I don't think I'd ever want to go big, but you know, maybe somebody over the years would want to go big, but not for me. I'm happy with what we're doing. Paula, I'm going to let you say something too.
Well, one of the things too is that when the elders were sitting around when we were boiling, is Marie Cameron. She's now passed on, but one of the things that always stuck out in my mind was that she was always told as a little girl that when the crow comes back and you hear them, that's when you get your taps in the trees. So that always stuck out in my mind.
Yeah, and the woodpecker, one of my uncles who would be 122 right now, he told me about the woodpeckers too. He said, when you hear those woodpeckers active in the trees, the bugs are moving. He said, it's time to tap the trees. So we've interviewed a lot of the elders over the years, and it's just the things they tell us are just wonderful. And, you know, and they're spot on. There's just what they say is spot on, you know. And I was telling you about the Forest Service that really got all of our property from our allotments, and nobody owned their allotments after a very short amount of time. But my sister and I, so we don't have a lot of maple trees here in Ganoje County. Really, we don't. So we got a permit from the Forest Service, and this is it. Number one. Is the very first permit ever given on the National Forest to tap trees. So we're kind of proud of this. This is in the year 2000. Thank you. This is in the year 2000. So we actually did get a permit to go and tap on National Forest land. And actually we still tap there today. So we've kind of moved around. And then my brother Joe is on here also. I can't see Joe, but I know you're here somewhere. And actually,
Just got back. My phone died for a bit.
oh, your phone died. So Joe is still tapping trees also. Him and I and my sister Paula have been in this for like 40 plus years, like I was saying. So Joe still taps in that same area, what we call the bike trails. That's still where he taps every year. Joe, would you like to say anything?
No.
Oh, that's unusual.
Okay. And yes, I do tap in that same area and stuff, and you know, going through the whole maple history and stuff that I remember. And you know, I worked for the Forest Service for 30 some years, and we did a lot of management of the sugar maple tree. And when I first started with them, that was our main job, was to get the maple trees thinned out so they can grow better. And we almost loved them to death. At one time, we'd go and mark the trees that we want to save, and the loggers would cut all the trees that weren't marked. Well, it turned out the paint causing damage to the tree and put a big old rot spot on all the best tapping spots of the tree. So a lot of trees, you know, that was 45 years ago we did that, and a lot of the trees got big rot spots on them, right where you'd want to tap. So it was kind of sad. But our little bike trail spot here, over the 20 years that I've been living right here on the spot, we're getting good at sugar maple regen on it, which is a good sign that they're rejuvenating anyways. But then again, when trees are stressed out, they put out a lot more seeds too. So a lot of the sugar maples have been stressed over the years, mostly due to drought. I'm I'm on a little bit of a clay-based soil here with a little bit of good sugar sand down there, good Kalkaska sands, but it's not much. And when we get drought years, they dry out here. You get a lot of maple dieback. So we've lost. I got a couple here, my favorite tap trees I quit tapping them just because they are dying back. So we notice it here on the clay soils a lot, and throughout the national forest around here, you see it in different areas where, especially where you got the rock formations, the limestones down near St. Agnes and stuff. There's not a lot of topsoil, and the waters are perched water table there. So when you get to drought years, you lose a lot of trees down that way because it dries up quicker. So, but there's definitely been a change in the last 40 years over that I've noticed, as being in the woods and managing for them. So that's all I know.
Another thing that I think was so odd was last year I tapped in February. And I kept thinking this can't be right, because I'd never tapped in February before in my life. But last year we had to tap in February. Yeah, and that was, and like I said, we don't have many maples around here, but we have a lot of ash. And that emerald ash borer has decimated the ash. I mean, I look outside my window and the trees have no bark now. The first thing they do is lose their bark, and they're standing dead trees everywhere. And if anything was to happen to the maple, anything like that, I just can't imagine. I feel bad for our basket makers here because they depend on those ash for their baskets, and that emerald ash borer has just done a number on them. It's just very, very upsetting. Well, I think that's it for me. So it's been a pleasure. I hope.
Well, we can say that if anybody on here who wants to start, you don't have to go big and expensive. Just start with the milk jug and some copper tubing. That's all you got to start with.
Yeah, when we grew up, like I said, we didn't have it, but now none of my children remember not tapping trees. So, that's, to me, that's such a wonderful thing. They, like my
She's
youngest,
got a lot of kids.
I have 11 children, and they remember growing, and now that's their memory now as they grow up tapping trees. And many of our nieces and nephews and cousins and now grandchildren. So, and more people in our community now are tapping trees. It's just a wonderful thing to see. Wonderful. So, miigwech.
Rich.
Oh, miigwech, thank you all for sharing. Joe, real quick, before we transition here, someone had a question asking for some clarification about the rot spots on those trees that you had marked. They're asking, was it from the paint, or was it from when they were cutting the other trees down and bumping ones?
No, it was the actual paint spot. It was back then it was a lead-based paint, and it would actually start a canker on the tree, and then eventually it turned into a little rot spot. So you can go out like right near Rayco there, we marked several stands that we always go back to as a visit site. And you can, they're definite. You look at they're all nice saw logs there now, but they got that big old round rotten spot right there at breast height where we marked them.
Dang.
Yep.
Well, and
Since
Joe, you bring up a really good. Oh,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Where was it? It was real noticeable that it was, since then the Forest Service and everybody else, they went to a water-based paint now. So it stopped the problem.
And I was just gonna make mention, you bring up a really good point about what it means to spend time with those trees, what it means to actually get to know them and to go back there year after year, season after season, and even just outside of the season of just sugaring, people forget that it's really important to be with those trees regularly, to know, hey, there's something going on with this tree. And when you get to know them in that way, you really get to understand, maybe this time I don't tap these ones or this section, or we look to another place, and it's a little more work for us, right? But it's also good
Manners.
to, yeah,
Good manners.
that's, yes, good manners, taking care of those trees.
You get to learn. you get to learn trees too as you tap them over the years. I know I got 4 or 5 trees here that they're right tight to the clay soils, and I got some balsam fir near them, so the snow don't cover the ground as good, and I get deeper frost there. So they won't start producing until the snow's melted around them good for a while.
Yeah.
Yep, same thing we've got here. We've got trees where we know the early ones and then the later ones, and we're within the 30 acres we have here, and we have all these different spots, and those trees all behave a little bit differently. And every morning get up and say, oh, I bet you this tree's running really good today, or I bet you that one's taking a break this afternoon. And it's wonderful to get to know them. I know them as well, those kids some days.
Yeah, appreciate that. Miigwech y'all for sharing. I think we're gonna go ahead and continue on with the panel. It's about 8:36 here on the Eastern time. So I know it's getting late. But also I wanted to make a comment too. Wanda had mentioned the cutover period that took place here after we had signed those treaties. And so, you know, they came after the minerals and they came after our forests. And I've heard people in the past, you know, when they think about maple syrup or they think about maple products, the only mention of us doing these things is like a paragraph where it mentions, and Indians used to make syrup and blah, 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 blah. But we don't anymore, right? So like people don't necessarily associate us with this food or even this economy anymore. And it's because of that cutover period that happened. And you know, you can't sugar if you don't have any trees there. And what's interesting is if you look at the time period when that was taking place, so that was like the late 1800s, early 1900s. That was our economy. I mean, we were actually making enough sugar, and we were selling our stuff to some of the eastern cities back then, and big old McCucks. And once they cut our trees down, you know, we couldn't sugar anymore. Well, that entire economy basically took off over on the East Coast. And so now when people hear about maple syrup, they think about Maine and Vermont and Canada. They don't necessarily think about it, the Anishinaabe people. But those trees have recovered now to a point where you know, we can get back out there and start rebuilding those relationships with those trees and start tapping those trees again like we used to. And so history is a really important part of this entire conversation. I mean, we're talking about future stuff, but we have to talk about the past too. So I really appreciate the Ganuja Conning folks bringing up that historical perspective too, because that's really important.
Well, and even Wanda showing us your certificate right there on the national forest, and showing we have those rights right within ceded territory all over. And what a wonderful example to show folks, you know, you don't have to even have all the trees on your property. You have the right to be able to go and participate and be in relation with those trees again, and not just because you own the land, right, but because the trees exist in our homeland here. And so Miigwech for showing that and sharing that with us. It was a wonderful way of sharing. Thank you so much.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna go ahead and jump to our next panelist. And this next person is Bruce Savage. He comes from Fond du Lac over there in Minnesota. So now we're actually heading west towards the western extent of the Ininaatig territory. Bruce is someone that I've always looked up to since I met him many years ago, as a mentor for me. I know I spend a lot of time over there. It's about he jokes that I have to drive about 5.5 hours into work whenever I go over there and help him out. But this is a guy that's been doing it for so long. And I really appreciate his knowledge and his work ethic, and everything that he's been trying to do. On paper, his introduction is Bruce Savage is a member of the Fond du Lac band. Him and his wife, Tawny, and their children own and operate Spirit Lake Native Farms over in Sawyer, Minnesota since 1999. I know he's been sugaring longer than that. They harvest and finish wild rice and tap 2,100 sugar maple trees each year. They mentor many young people and hope to provide families in the area with an important traditional food source. And as far as I know, I think Bruce and Tawny and Spirit Lake Native Farms is probably the largest indigenous producer of maple products that I'm aware of in the country. And someone correct me if I'm wrong there, but he's doing some amazing things, and I really do respect and appreciate Bruce. And I'll open it up for you, and you can share whatever you'd like with the group here. So Miigwech.
First off, Jerry's wrong. Just so you guys know, he's not right. There's probably larger native producers out there that don't get recognition. I don't consider myself a large producer. That's just about the average capacity that one person can manage with some family help with the right equipment. Yeah, I started sugaring at a young age. I was brought out to an elder's home on the western edge of the Fond du Lac Reservation and left. I believe I was an indentured servant for a couple of weeks a year. And I spent a lot of my young adult life being a laborer at different families' maple operations. And one thing I always emphasize is at any maple operation, it's your sugar maker that's the most important person. And that's the person who determines when that product is ready. You know, I've always been like the machinist or mechanic that made sure that all the equipment was properly functioning and made sure there was plenty of firewood, but there was always someone there that as Marvin mentioned, manned the ladle. The person that manned that label or spoon, that's the most important person there, because you can ruin that product pretty quick by burning it or making it too thin and it'll mold. So I've always emphasized that sugar maker, that's the most important person there of the operation. I got into a little bit larger scale in my early 20s, because I'm sure Marvin and some of the other folks on here can remember the old treaty wars. At that time, I was just living in the Twin Cities, pursuing my career as working on sports cars and hanging out, and I would still go up north during tax season, which it falls right at the time of sugaring season, and make sugar every year. And during that era, I started having customers coming in and asking me about these treaty rights. And I would explain to them that, you know, they didn't teach us about them in our high schools. I don't know, maybe about yours they did. But right now I'm really trying to focus on fixing your foreign car, and all the manuals are in foreign languages. And I don't have a degree in treaty law. And so I started researching it, you know, to be able to satisfy my customers' interests, being I was the only native they probably knew. And I read an article, and I believe it was in the St. Paul Pioneer Press, and it was someone who claimed that he wasn't anti-treaty, but he had some interesting comments. And at the very end of the comment, it said, throughout history, if you control the food, you control the people. And being a young, stubborn guy, I said, you know, nobody's going to control my food. And so I really started to look into different food. And with that, I started looking at my maple operation, because at that time I was driving my German car up to the reservation and found a stand of sugar maple that was right off the pavement. And I just go in the woods with some boiling vessels and build a lean-to and hang out there during tax season and make syrup. And one day I went to my dad's house on the lake, because he'd always make the pancakes that Marvin always talks about his grandpa making. And since I had the syrup, he'd gladly make the pancakes. And on a local newspaper, it talked about a family's commercial maple sugar operation in Sawyer. And that's where my father lived. And I asked my dad, I said, you know, who is this guy? And he had no idea about it. Nobody that I knew on the reservation knew about it. So I grabbed the address and went and found the road, and I came out here and I introduced myself to the individual. And it really sparked my interest because, you know, being somewhat mechanically inclined, I love equipment. And a lot of us natives love equipment and modern technology. And so, you know, that started sometime in late, maybe mid 80s. And we went and purchased our first evaporator. My brother Jeff, I think, paid for half of it. He still curses me about it today that I owe him the money. And I went to a place in central Wisconsin that was selling evaporators. It was a used one. And it was an older fellow, non-Indian guy, you know, and he was great, gave me a great amount of knowledge and teachings. And I asked him, I said, so how long have you sugared? And he said, all my life. And I made it a point for myself to have that goal that my kids and grandkids would always be able to say that. I started when I was probably 12, 13 years old, somewhere in there, maybe between 9 and teenage years. But I always made sure that my kids and all my grandkids are going to spend their first year of life in that sugar bush so they could pass that on and say that they've sugared all their life. It's like Jerry had mentioned, you know, it is an economy that our communities have relied upon for thousands of years, and we have been removed from it. I still attend as many of the maple informational conferences I can and equipment shows, just so that we have at least one native or two, however many I can get together to keep following that industry, because it is very important that we stay knowledgeable about something that we've created. And then everyone was telling stories, and they're all nice stories. And the ones that I read about and heard about is how we always protected our resources. And that's one thing that always stayed true to me. You know, I always explain that, you know, some people, they'll come and they'll say, oh, it's so nice to get this for free. And I said, it was never free. I said, there was blood shed for these resources throughout Indian country. I said, there was wars fought over these lands. They said nothing was free. And they even, there's stories out there about where people would raid other people's sugar bushes and steal their bounty of the year. And the story I'll tell you is a modern one of that. And there's a group in the metro Twin Cities area that sugars every year. And they're always really proud about the product that they make, which is good. And they wanted to show off their maple sugar to me. And I said, no, I don't want to see your sugar. You know, I said, you need to protect that. And I didn't go into their little lodge to go see it. But lo and behold, that week, someone came in there and stole all their sugar. And I told them, I said, that's because you're not supposed to show it off like that and tell everyone about it. You know, those are things that we need to protect at all parts of it. But, you know, it is a good time of year. I consider it the new year. It's the real first plant bounty that we harvest. So I always consider it as the new year. People ask me a lot, you know, what I think the sugaring season is. And I always tell them, I don't know. It depends so much on daily temperatures that it's really hard to predict. But the only thing that I do notice is during drought time, the sugar content is higher in the sap. And so then I burn less firewood, which is good. And I always encourage the science and the engineering and equipment. You know, there's so much there that our communities don't see. I think me and Jerry argue about when we met him, but when he claims that we met, I said he'd have to been about 10. But I also do the wild rice, and I was having a very frustrating day with my equipment, and it was really hot. If you ever finish rice, it's smoky, it's dusty, it's hot. Everyone wants their product on immediately. And I was having some equipment failure, so I took a walk to the western edge of our property here, and it's where the balsams are a little bit thicker, and the spruce swamp starts. And I figured no one would be able to find me back there because of all the wind blowdowns and the struggle you have to get back in there. And then sure enough, I had my phone with me. And I'm trying to crawl through the woods there, and my phone goes off, and it was an organization out of central Wisconsin that was asking me to work on a project with them. And it was for the Organic Maple Syrup Producers Cooperative. And I explained to them, I said, I'm sorry, but I can't. I said, most of your larger maple sugar operators are already land barons. I said, there's, I work in Indian country, and any of my spare time that I would have, I said, I want to work with my people. I said, a lot of people have that luxury to be able to volunteer their time and work on special interest projects. And I said, if I'm going to work on any, it's going to be for our Great Lakes region maple producers. And they offered to have dinner with me and talk about it. And I went and had dinner with them, and I wasn't real interested. I told them I'm not really interested, and I said, but if you guys want to work on a really cool project, I said, what we should look at is the Intertribal Maple Syrup Producers Cooperative. And this group, they didn't have any interest in it. They're like, no. And I was getting up to leave to head home because I don't have a lot of time to waste being a farm owner. And I also work to be able to afford the farm. And I said, you guys are forgetting one thing. I said, the Great Lakes Indians could be the world's largest producing organization in the world overnight. I said, the tribes around the Great Lakes control more acreage of sugar maple on the American side and the Canadian side than any organization in the world. And I was getting up to leave, and I got home, and one of the guys called me, and he said, after speaking with you, I thought about that. And if I'm not correct, Jerry, wasn't that about 10 years ago? We tried to organize that. Did he go to bed?
I'm still here. No, it was a while. It probably was 10 years ago. Yeah, probably was.
And
10 years
I
ago
was
now.
really surprised how our Native communities really haven't had an interest in it, or someone hasn't kind of grabbed the torch and ran forward with that, because that's a huge recognition on the land base that all the Great Lakes Indians on both sides of the border have access to. So that little project that me and Jerry worked on has kind of been in a stalled out stage for 8 years, I'd have to say, because both of us tried to actually be producers, and being a producer really consumes a lot of your time. So if anyone's got technical questions, my farm, we own 78.25 acres or something. I thought it was an 80, but I guess the state snuck in the 2 acres at one time for a forest tower. And we only tap on about 30 of those acres at this time, and we have about 2,100 trees on a tubing system. And I really like the tubing system. If you're going to do any type of large scale running equipment through in and out of the forest during that time of the year, can do a lot of damage. And another thing I want to touch on is what you'll find in probably any maple community is everyone wants to come and tap, and then they leave. then they come back when it's in the jar. That's not the point I'm trying to get across, but the point I'm trying to get across is tapping that tree can be very harmful. Don't just let anyone get a hold of your tapping equipment, because they could do a lot more damage to your crop trees than most people realize. You know, some of this educational stuff should be talking about, and Jerry knows this kind of language, is the cambium layer. You know, once you drill through that cambium layer, which is the living portion of that tree, and you start exposing the inner part of that tree, I don't know what Jerry calls that, being the forester that he is, you start to promote rot in those trees and expose them to disease. So there's a lot more to it, you know, than just going out there and thinking you can do these practices. You know, I encourage everybody, even our wild rice harvesters, to go out with people that know what they're doing and serve an internship, you know, so that we're not doing more damage than we realize. I'm probably guilty of that myself, you know, and it was attending a lot of these technical maple conferences and stuff that really gave me the insight on the proper techniques, because they're claiming that, and Jerry's the scientist behind all this, but the further on the outside of the cambium layer of the tree is where the highest sugar content was. And if you really look back historically, when they notched that tree, they just nicked that outer layer of that cambium layer. They didn't hack 3 inches into the tree to try to gain as much sap as they could. They just scored that outer part of that cambium layer. And so to me, that tells me that they already knew that hundreds of years ago, that highest sugar content flowed on the outer part of that cambium layer. And I hope that some of these events, that whoever it is that's hosting these, really start to share that technical information with our people, because that's what we're lacking a lot of in Indian country. So I don't know if that's what you guys wanted out of me, but that's what I do. Gigawaba men.
Hey, go ahead,
Jerry,
Bruce.
hang on before you go. Can you tell people about your evaporator and the capacities that thing can handle?
Well, first off, you got to understand, I call the maple equipment dealers the mafia of maple sugaring, because they want their cut. If you get a profit out of it, they want to make sure they get their share. And so with that, they'll sell you on different things, you know, in the industry that they can project that their equipment can do for you. And one of them, and when you start to get into the production levels of maple sugaring, they're always looking for the lightest colored syrup. And so that's one of the things they sell you on. And the other thing is how many gallons an hour of sap that their equipment would boil off. And what that really means is the quicker you can boil off the water, the lighter colored the syrup is. Has anyone explained to any of you? You know, we all know sap comes out of the tree clear, right? Like water. And then we all see it turns brown. Do y'all know where the brown comes from? It comes from the caramelizations of the suspended sugars in that liquid every time it flows over the bottom of the flame front of whatever boiling vessel you use. So every time that sugar is gone over that fire front, it caramelizes it and makes it darker and darker and darker. And so equipment dealers, you know, to make theirs the best, they'll want to tell you that it can make a lighter syrup because it boils off that water faster than the competitors. And the machine Jerry's talking about is it's not brand new, but it's new to us, and I've been working on it diligently since, I don't know, December, November, trying to acquire it for one, because it was up in Ontario. Trying to get it across the border can be a challenge. And we got it home, and I'm still working on it and assembling it, but they're saying that its capacity will be able to boil between 230 and 250 gallons of sap an hour, utilizing about 30% less firewood than what I would use with my old evaporator. So I can't say what it'll actually do, but that's what we're hoping to do, because we have going to be increasing our raw product yield by almost double than what we did on our older. We had a 4x12 Waterloo evaporator that was supposed to do about 160. I've never been able to get it to achieve that. And then I'll say another thing. Marvin mentioned firewood too, and he said I laughed about it. And the reason being was I wasn't until I was 40 years old, Marvin, before I had enough wood for the next year. I struggled with that for years. And after I turned 40, I was finally smart enough to make sure I had enough wood put up for the next season. And that makes a huge difference in your boiling capacity. And Jerry can vouch for that, because that green wood is, I don't know how many % moisture still. And so you're using a lot of your BTUs to boil the water out of the wood before it'll even burn. So I always say, get out there and get your wood cut, Jerry.
Next year, Bruce, next year. I'm 39 this year, so I'll have my wood together next year. You know, there was one question in there that's probably it's an important question. Maybe you can address that, Bruce. Alyssa had asked, is using gravity drip harvesting important to maintaining the health of the tree versus the suction harvesting or the vacuum lines? Yeah.
Well, first off, people need to understand one thing is that there's, 14.2 inch-pounds of atmospheric pressure pushing in every direction. Also pushing against the tree and pushing up every single hose. So if you can achieve over 14%, you would have to achieve over 14 inch-pounds of vacuum before you're even doing anything other than removing the atmospheric pressure. So if you take a vacuum gauge and wrap your lips around it and pull on it, suck on it, you're going to see you can almost bottom that vacuum gauge out. Well, if you go try to do that to a tree and tell me how much sap you get out of it, it really doesn't increase the volume of sap that much, even though some of the equipment dealers might tell you it does. But basically what the vacuum does is gets the material down to your collecting vessels in a timely manner so that it doesn't freeze. And we all know you want to get that sap boiled as soon as possible. At the very most, they say that the tree may sense like an atmospheric pressure change, and that's what actually makes the sap flow. And I don't know if everyone on here knows, but sap just doesn't flow down the tree. It moves in every direction. Jerry the forester is the guy that should be cluing you all in on this stuff. But so, and also the vacuum is a dead-ended vacuum. It's not like your vacuum cleaner that you're vacuuming up with. It's capped off at the end. So it's the vacuum actually just helps you transport the material, your liquids, more than having to deal with gravity. And they do have that, 3/16 gravity too now, systems that they're doing. And they're actually pulling a higher vacuum with just gravity than they are with vacuum pumps. But the problem is they'll usually get a little bit of sawdust in the lines and in their taps, and then it plugs up. Because you all see the wood chips that come out in your taps after you drill the tree, I think, don't you? Or do you got magic trees over there in Michigan that don't do that? Any other
Yeah,
questions?
yeah, there's quite a few questions that are coming in, and one thing that maybe I'll interject here too, from what I've heard, because we actually put about 100 taps on vacuum this last season, and one of the rationale behind that was that what Bruce had said earlier too is that anytime that you basically wound that tree, you're creating a vector for bacteria and stuff like that to get inside of that tree. So inside of that tree, everything is essentially sterile, and anytime you wound it, you're opening it up for infections. What I've heard with vacuum line, which is why we decided to try it this year, was that if you have it on vacuum, and we don't have it on vacuum day in and day out, we only turn it on when it's starting to warm up enough, but it doesn't allow any of that sap to go back into the tree. So if you have gravity lines and the sap starts coming out, the temperatures start dropping, the trees actually start sucking that sap back in as well. And so anything that's been outside of that tree has been exposed to that bacteria. When it freezes again, it'll pull some of that, even in your spiles and your taps itself, like it'll pull that stuff back into the tree, which has the potential to create a larger wound within that tree. Not to say the tree can't handle it, but what they're saying with some of these vacuum lines is that the hole stays cleaner, and that way the tree can actually heal faster, was the theory behind it. And as someone that's conscious about the health of our forest back there, I wanted to try it. And so this last season was the first season we've ever ran vacuum. And we'll know in a couple years time how those trees respond, but trying to keep those tap holes as clean as possible. I wouldn't recommend using any sort of cleaners or bleach solutions. There's all kinds of crazy stuff out there. But try to make sure that you keep your taps clean when you're putting them in there and stuff like that. So that's some of the theory behind vacuum as well. So I don't know if you have anything to add to that, Bruce, but that's something I want to.
Yeah, I've heard people will even pack mud into their old tap holes, and that's a big no-no too, according to forest health folks. You're infecting that tree with possible soil-borne disease that can cause that tree to start to deteriorate. But there's a lot to it, and I really wish more Native folks would participate. My brother and I just went to a big open house and in central Wisconsin at a big maple operation. I think he's the biggest CDL dealer in the lower 48. And I didn't see a single Native in there. A bunch of Amish people though, getting their supplies, but no Indians. So I usually try to drag at least one or two Indians with me. We brought in what our ancestors have given us. So
awesome. Well, I think we should probably move on. It's 9 o'clock over here. Miigwech, Bruce, for your stories and sharing. I know there's so much that we can talk about around this topic. And I mean, there's culture, there's technology, there's science, there's so many things. And that's really what we want to do with this group when we're starting these conversations, is to really, this seems to be like a kickoff, let's get people together, let's have some of these conversations, and then let's keep these conversations going. And I think we want to talk about that a little bit at the end, but we would love to have a conference at some point in time where we start bringing all of these things together, and we start getting our people back in there and really trying to get our folks back out on the land again. But there's so many hurdles, and that's a whole nother topic that we can talk about, like access to land, access to capital, you name it, just access to how to do it. So I appreciate everyone that's hanging in there with these conversations and being a part of this, because it's starting.
a point that should be made, especially with this, and they make this with language and culture and all the other things that we're doing as Mishtambe people trying to get back to these, is you got to be there for it, right? You gotta take the time. I think
You gotta
Bruce
do the
made the
work.
joke. I was an indentured servant, right? Like that's you got to show up, and you show up year after year, and you show up season after season, and you show up in between seasons. And we still send Jerry out over there to help with Bruce and the work that he's got to do, and there's trees down and they got to do stuff throughout the whole year. And it's really important for people to understand you got to get out there and do it. And that's a resounding and continuing message we have here. So our next
Where's the paper?
partners here, we have the group from the Grand Portage Gitcho Nikaming community. So I'll let Jerry introduce our folks here.
Oh, okay, I'm doing that.
Yep.
All right, so there's we have Eric Carlson. Apparently he's known as Sap Man. Is that right? That's what I hear. That's the word on the street, Eric. Good to have you. Eric is he's been a 30-year tribal sugar busher, who also leads the reservation's wildfire crew. Awesome. Yeah, that's something that I do too. And Joe Carrick as well. We got several wildland firefighters on here. That's awesome. We also have River Spry, who adds another 4+ years to the cumulative years of sugar harvest in Grand Portage and serves as a forestry technician. I'm going to mess this up. Matt Petz Guier, a descendant of the tribes of Europe, serves Grand Portage as a forester and has sugar bushed and studied maple forest for 20 years. So we've got another group effort here, and y'all can take it any direction that you feel necessary, and appreciate y'all for hanging on. Muted. Can't hear you. Still nothing.
Hey Jerry, can you hear me? It looks like Eric's having some technical problems.
Yeah, I hear you loud and clear.
All right, yeah, it's Pets Jaguar, if you get it. It's like doing a jig in the air, but that's okay.
I was kind of close. I'm sure it's been worse.
It's fine. Looks like I'm not sure what Eric's doing. Anyway, I guess I just want to, it's kind of hard following all these big acts. I guess I just want to right away apologize for speaking before my elders, and especially because I'm not Anishinaabe, and it's a lot of big shoes to fill. And hopefully Eric will get his stuff working, and as soon as he does, I will let him start talking, because he knows a lot more about sugaring in Grand Portage than I do. So he's having some problems though. I wonder if his headset died.
Hey Marnie, can we maybe send him the call-in number? Eric, if you have access to your email, maybe Marnie can send you an email with the number just to call in directly if you'd like to do that.
That'd be cool, Eric. Sure. I think it was on the last email I sent you today. Yep. Email sent at 1:34. I think if you use the Chicago number, it'll be able to hear you. I'm sorry, you were sounding loud and clear earlier. Also looks like Nick just sent you the number as well.
Oh, we're waiting for Eric to dial in. I guess one thing I'll say as a forester, being at the far western and kind of northern edge of the range of sugar maple up at Grand Portage, and on the North Shore kind of generally, our trees grow a bit slower than some of y'all's. And so when we talk about really trying to value those trees, I think there's a lot to be said to really take that seriously and value those trees, because where we are, can take, 60, 80 years for our trees to get to tappable size. And so then really taking care of them in a good way as best we can, and trying to, do these things to keep the tap holes clean and help them not tap them in a way that gets them hurt, is a good thing to do, because we just you can see in the background here, this is actually a picture of a sugar bush in my old stomping grounds down by Finland, Minnesota, and you can see some of them trees are pretty pole-like. They grow pretty slow up here, so we have to take good care of them. Are you there, Eric?
How's this sound?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Awesome.
Okay, excellent. That's good. Sorry about the technical difficulties there. Haven't really tested this system. Yeah, I'm just exhilarated by all the stories that are coming out. All the way from, everyone who's been talking today is almost telling the exact same story we have up here on the north side of the lake. As far as like the beginning, the introduction with the story of Sugarbush and how it's important to our people, on to all the little like details and the funny witticisms about slave labor and indentured service. I started working with my uncle in Sugarbush in the end of the 80s, and yeah, indentured servant. He hung around for about 10 years and taught me, I guess, enough, because he left us, and that kind of left me in charge. And so I don't know if you know this, my background. There's this sled, and that's the wood sled that we use to haul wood together, and it's too broken to be useful anymore. So I put it up in like the most beautiful spot in our sugar bush, and that's one thing that's really important to us too. Is that is the time of year that we remember those who have taught us and who have brought us to up to the sugar bush and given us that information, and that aren't with us anymore. So that's really important to me. There was a question about the tubing, and I had that same question, and I found out once again that my uncle actually taught me the answer. He taught me that when the thunderbirds return, wakes up the trees. Now, it's wildland firefighters. We know that when there's a storm coming in, that means cold front, but it also means low pressure system. Low pressure system, like what Bruce was saying there about the atmospheric temperature or pressure and the change in the pressure. That's what stimulates the trees, is that low pressure, and that's what causes them to start pumping out the sap more. So I know when there's a storm coming, it's definitely time to go check my bags or to get my taps in. Other indicators I use, of course, when the crows are flocking and returning, that's pretty common. But then I work in the woods, and so I drive by some of our swampy areas. If the willow trees, if the pussy willows are popping on the willow trees, that's another indicator. It's time to get up there and start digging out camp. The last thing I wanted to talk about, I guess, was about and it. So, like I've had, talked with Marnie, and I've talked with there's been a little changeover with their climate adaptation folks over the years, and they've always asked me if I noticed changes, and I'd kind of sit there and maybe not reply to them, or maybe just say no, because all the changes are changes I've affected to my sugar bush. Tree starts to like not produce as well. Firewood. That's my next firewood tree. So that comes, it gets cut down, put that in the fire, and then it's time to cook hot dogs. I go to a tree I cut down a year before, and there's all these stump sprouts. Well, and get some hot dog sticks and try to leave like one or two good ones, the best ones. The poles, like Jerry talked about, getting the pole material to build your structures. I'll go over to another place where I cut trees 10 years ago, and there's some good, perfect poles, and I would maybe leave the best one. And then this tree now is big enough to start tapping. I'll start tapping this tree. This other tree, back to the beginning of the cycle, this other tree is not producing as well. That's my firewood tree. So the response to the climate change thing is I'm already affecting a lot of change in my sugar bush. So I don't really notice any changes. They're producing. If they're not producing, then they're firewood. If they're firewood, then a few years later they're saplings and they're pole material. And so I think that is like how my uncle taught me how to manage my sugar bush. And then I went to a class because I work in forestry, and they taught this class about uneven aged management of shade tolerant, hardwood species. And I went to that class. I'm like, this is everything my uncle already taught me. So that's that tribal ecological knowledge coming into play. And even the thunderbirds returning and waking up the trees, it almost sounds like superstitious, but I believe that we had scientists back then, and then they didn't write a white paper. They told a story. They told a story that would stick, and so that thunderbirds returning is our ancestors' white paper. So a lot of our stories contain that kind of information that's pertinent to what we're doing and where we're going and how we're doing things. As far as passing on to the next generation, ever since the end of the 80s, working with the kids at Grand Portage, have been coming up to my sugar bush up until about 3 years ago. I was actually really pushed for the school to get their own educational forest. Now they have this 3-acre chunk of land. It's maple forest. There's a remote building there with all the facilities for a classroom, and they're spending the whole year in Sugar Bush. So they go up there for their I think it's Wobbin. Wobbin is the name of the place. Dawn, I guess. Anyways, they go up there every Friday, and so not only are they there to tap the trees, but they're collecting the sap, they're producing the syrup, they're finishing the product in the building. Then also in the fall, they're up there hauling the wood. In the wintertime, they're up there making observations, seeing what things have changed. And I think that having an educational forest associated with our grade school it's been a great boon beyond anything I could imagine. There's also, when they would come to my sugar bush, I always try to be welcoming, But now there are so many other educators that are incorporated into the school curriculum that it's far exceeded anything that's ever happened when they just came to my Sugar Bush or my family's Sugar Bush. And professionals from all other like we have a couple of parks here with State Park and a national park that come up. I know Marnie's been up to the school Sugar Bush along with some of the wardens, and I think it's created a far superior program for this passing along the appreciation of the forest to the next generations. I guess that just about covers everything I got. Thank you.
Yeah, so Matt, or I don't know if River is on or not, but if you guys have anything else you want to add, please do. It's your time. If not, we can move on. Up to y'all.
River, are you still on?
I don't know if you can hear me yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had to log in through Facebook.
Oh, okay.
I don't know if there's someone that can facilitate doing that. Put him up. I have no idea. So
I think we can.
Where's our IT guy? Now's your time to shine.
I put it in the chat, but then realized he couldn't see it. But River, I'm speaking to you to Facebook through Zoom. You can hop into the Zoom call. We now have space, so come on down.
So I guess in the meantime, while we're waiting for that, how many taps are you guys putting out there now? And Eric, it sounds like you have your own Sugar Bush, and then does the tribe have one that the school goes to, or you know, how many sugaring operations do you guys have on the res up there?
yeah, I have my Sugar Bush, and I'll usually just do about 30 taps. Depends on how much syrup I need. 7 taps will, in general, and on average, produce about a gallon of syrup at the end of the year. So if I need 3 gallons, I put up 21 taps. If I'm looking at 5 gallons, I'll put up like 35. It's more personal consumption and gifts only. Actually, there's one other thing I wanted to share about this. So I've always kind of done about that same number, but Uncle passed like the end of the 90s, kind of left me in there. Maybe felt a little bit alone, and I think this really makes me feel like I'm not alone in the Sugar Bush. I really appreciate this happening right now. And but so like for about 5 to 10 years there was maybe 1 or 2 other Sugar Bushes, and then there was about another like 5-10 years where there was like nobody at all up in Sugar Bush. And then kind of some of the old guys started getting back into it. Some of the other little family Sugar Bushes started getting back into it. River is a great example. I think he hangs 4 bags. Now there are 18 families having their own Sugar Bush, and then everyone has their own little different iteration of it too. We have a guy, I think he snowshoes in like 3 miles to get to his sugar camp, and then he makes maple syrup on top of it, which is a lot of work. So and then you have River gets 3 or 4 taps up and takes it home, and his little kids sit around and boil at home, and they finish it off, and They're proud of their product. I'm seeing the results, of all this, education and outreach. Now, so the kids that were back in the late 80s or late 90s, I guess maybe late 80s, maybe even mid 70s, were like the ones that went out with my uncles before me. They're all adults now. They're all looking for things to do with their kids and to have this activity after a long cold winter with lots and lots of snow. It's an awesome gift that the maple tree has given us. So yeah, 18 different sugar bushes. There's other families too, the Ganyas, who they've been tapping like the whole time I've been, and but then there's other folks too starting out new. There's something else. Yeah, I think that's about it. I think too that people are starting to learn all that about how, not only does the maple takes care of us, but we have to do stuff too to take care of it. Can't just leave it alone. And I think that was kind of part of what I mentioned to Marnie, was that the forest managers, they need to do some management in such a way that they're scarring producing trees, but for sure in a way to allow for this change to happen, affect some change. This is not a stagnant, unchanging cover type or whatever you want to call it, forest. Change needs to happen.
So if I toss a question out there, and this, I don't know if River is going to be on. If you ever get on, feel free to just jump in. But there was a question here too that I think all the panelists could respond to, is the question of sugar sand or niter. There's been a couple other questions too. Maybe we can get to those, but sugar sand, where do you stand on that? The niter, like the sandy stuff that you get at the bottom of your bottle sometimes. Where do you stand on that? Do you throw it out? Do you eat it? Do you filter all of that out? Where do you stand on that?
Well, figured out a pretty good system for getting it all out. Taken since the end of the 80s to figure it out.
Are you filtering, or are you using filter press, or?
Yeah, I filter. I actually slow down the boil. I mean, I really slow it down. It adds another half hour to each batch, but you'll allow it to settle out, and then you run it through. I just use the cone filters like you get at any old L&M or whatever, the thin cone filters. So I use, but it gets it all out in that filter.
Yeah, and that niter, maybe Bruce can answer that too, is essentially just like as that sap is condensing during the boiling process, there's not just sugars that's in that sap, but there's a lot of other nutrients, macro, micronutrients, that are also condensing in that process as well, minerals, and so those condense and they get attracted to each other as well, and they create this sort of sand material. Yeah, people deal with it in different ways. What is your method there, Mr. Savage?
I use a diametric earth product, which is basically ground up prehistoric seashells. I really struggled going to that process because I use it with my filter press. because growing up, we were always told to never put nothing in your syrup. You had to be immaculately clean with your sap and all your utensils and your boiling vessels. And then, settling out, yeah, that works, but you'll end up with, when you start making a larger volume of it, you'll end up with this like 5 to 10 gallons of goo. And there's a lot of sugar in there. And so I researched it, and like I said, it was a real struggle to steer that diametric earth, which is basically just a calcium, and acquired a filter press, and I filter it all out because when I go to market, and I primarily bottle in glass, because you can make sure that your product, one thing about marketing is one customer can steer away several hundred for you. It only takes one to ruin 100 customers for you. And so if you get something wrong within the process, and if you bottle in those plastic jugs and they start to mold or something, at least with glass, you can pull it off the shelf. And, I enjoy marketing as much as I enjoy equipment and bottling, because as Jerry had mentioned earlier, us Native people sometimes get classified as being lazy or don't do anything. And that's one of the reasons I do a lot of things, is to counter that stereotype. And in marketing, unfortunately, the population of people outside of Indian country, they see an Indian with one bad product, it affects all of us, because they think we're all the same. The one Indian is part of the whole Indian nation that they think of across the country. And so in marketing, the niter, as we know, is nothing wrong with it, but it's in glass, it'll settle in the bottom of the bottle. And if, back in the time when I was selling it for $5 a bottle, if I got to sit there and spend 20 minutes talking to a customer about what it is and explaining it to them, I'm only selling 3 bottles an hour. I'm not making any money. If I have to re-educate everyone that I come across. And so if I could just remove it from the bottle, then I don't have to educate everyone as I'm trying to market the product. And, marketing, also is showing our youth the value too, in our world today. Unfortunately, a lot of our youth don't see a lot of worth in what our ancestors did. And that's because, television and school and everything teaches them that there's a value to things, and they don't really show that value. And so that was part of our original business plan, when we purchased this farm back in '99, was to show our youth the contributions our ancestors have made to these different economies that a lot of non-natives today have the privilege to enjoy and support their families, and actually purchase land on the products that our ancestors derived, and the market. And so that's what I do. Jerry, be careful asking me questions, because I have a long answer.
I may have the power to mute you. I might not, though. But no, all this input is good. I mean, there's so many different perspectives about this whole process. I'd like to give
River's on. River made it in.
Okay. Let's see if we can finish this question real quick and give the Carricks and Perrin a chance to answer about the sugar sand or the niter. Do you guys do anything with that? when you make it, or do you just leave it in your own bottles? I know we eat it, the stuff that we have here when we get niter in our syrup, we eat it. It's good. And then also if Marvin's still on, if he wants to address that or not.
Who are we going?
Go ahead.
Well, go ahead, Joe.
Oh, I said, I just leave it in for my own product and stuff. I leave it in there. If I'm giving it away, I'll try and doctor up a good jar to give away, but it doesn't bother me to eat it. It's all good and sweet.
Same here. I don't mind it at all. I don't take it out at all, but I don't give those bottles away either. Like Joe said, I would keep them for my own use, but it doesn't bother me at all. Sometimes I have more. Some years I seem to have more. And last year, I don't think I had any. I think it was all clear last year.
Yeah,
I
think
remember
different soil
those,
types and stuff like that will play a role in how much you get every year too, and sap chemistry and stuff like that. Sorry, Paula.
Well, we had some elders from Sugar Island. Do you remember the Andrews, Wanda?
Yes.
And I remember them telling us that was really good to drink that stuff for medicinal purposes.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think a lot of it is calcium, and I've heard some suggestions in like history about we didn't have milk products, and so where do we get the calcium for our bones? Well, I think they've done some archaeological studies on this, and we had some of the most dense bones around. Hard-headed, I think that's still a trait in my family, but it probably comes from all that the calcium and stuff from the sugar that we eat too. So I don't know if Marvin's still on or not, but
Matt was just making a point too, that others have told him that they use that niter sands in the gardens. There's a lot of minerals in there, so I know we've managed to up in the production. Of course, we're getting more sands than we've ever had before. And so I wound up using it to help with a scrub that we've been making. I make a sugar scrub with it, just to help me cleaning my hands up and stuff at the end of the year. Because Jerry's got a nice bottle of it just to demonstrate for you all.
yeah, this is like one of our last batches here, and this is personal use, but all that stuff on the bottom there is niter, and we'll eat it up. So for people that don't know what we're talking about, that's it right there.
Mm-hmm.
Is Marvin still on?
Is Marvin still on there? I'm not sure if he's still. See him jumping on.
Okay. Yeah, it's River is on. Is that right? Is that what I'm hearing now? River wants to jump on and say some things.
Yeah, can you hear me?
No, oh yeah.
Yep.
Yep. Loud and clear.
All right. Well, I don't have too much to share since I'm pretty new to it. My name's River Spry. I work for Grand Portage Tribal Forestry as a forestry tech for the past 5 or 8 years, and have been fortunate to have some amazing coworkers like Tim Miller, Eric Carlson, and Matt Petz-Jaguar. I was introduced to the sugar bush by Eric after my first winter here in Grand Portage. And since then, we decided to do it ourselves at home. Unfortunately, each time we put taps up, I get called out for a wildfire assignment since the seasonalities coincide. So we usually pull the taps, and then the family will boil the sap down, and we make do with what we get. So we have limited experience in the sugar bush to share so far, but we're trying, and I'm taking notes tonight. And if anything, you get a good spectrum of experience tonight. Miigwech miu.
Me great job, Jane. I gotta correct myself. Matt reminded me that Jeff gets credit for talking about the gardens first.
Yeah, and there is one more question on here too that I think is probably a good one to address for people that haven't really gotten or don't have too much experience. But the question of tapping and how often you can tap the same tree year after year, and how do you move it around without hurting the tree? For us, we broke up our little forest in the back into like 3 sections, and we were trying to basically tap 2 sections a year and letting 1 section rest, depending on how they were doing. So if you have the luxury of resting some of the trees, that's something that we do. On some of the larger trees though in the back that are pushing 30 inches in diameter, you only have to move that tap hole just a little bit. But it's also a good idea to kind of move it around the tree, and you don't want to necessarily just create this this weak spot on one particular side of the tree, because if you get the wind in the right direction, that tree can fail too. So just being mindful of that. That's been sort of our experience. If you can rest any of the trees, that's great. If not, just try to be strategic about where you're placing those taps, so you don't have like a weak spot on one side of the tree. But if anyone else wants to address that question about tapping and how often they can tap the same tree, please feel free to jump in. Feel like I'm in school now. I'm going to start calling on people. Who's got a suggestion? Or what do you do? The sap man, you tap the same spots? You're still on the phone,
Yeah,
or do you move it around, or what do you do?
I do move around, but also there's one tree where I always put my offerings, and I always tap that tree. And my uncle before me always tapped that tree. So I mean, we're talking back to the mid-70s. That tree has been getting tapped. And I'm still going to tap it again this spring. So I mean, what's the plus and minus? 45 years. That tree's been getting tapped every year. You, like Jerry says, you move it around. You don't tap in the same spot. If you do it right, within about 4 or 5 years, you won't even see that hole again. Till it's firewood. But I don't know. I don't know that it hurts the trees at all. But then that's just a natural part of managing a sugar bush. If a tree isn't producing, then you need to get your firewood from somewhere too. So.
I think another observation about tapping as well is the size of the taps or the spiles have actually changed through the years. And I think the understanding early on was like a bigger tap yields more sap. And now they're recommending like 5/16 for you don't lose any productivity or sap amounts, or it's negligible, and it's a smaller wound in the tree too, so it doesn't have as much of a void or a space to fill and grow over. So when you're looking to start tapping, or you are tapping, the size of the tap will make a difference too, and the smaller 5/16 it seems to be I guess best practices now. So I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on that.
I've been
question.
using those 5/16 as well, and yeah, they're great. And what I like is it actually allows me to tap smaller trees. So rather than having to wait until it's a 10-inch in diameter tree, I'm hanging bags on anything over 6.
That's impressive. Are you still getting a decent amount of sap out of those smaller diameters?
Pretty good.
Is it comparable to the bigger ones?
Yeah, not quite like the duration. I'll get a good full bag, 3 or 4 times, but then my big main producers will still continue producing like earlier and later, whereas that one kind of seems to get, pardon the pun, tapped out.
You made a noise, Bruce, so you have to talk now.
I just burped. No, I'm using a 1964 size tap this year, and I also ordered 2000 1/4 inch. So they're even going smaller for quicker healing time. So,
yeah, things are constantly changing, and it's good to have, I guess, the experience, like the people that we have on this conversation right now to help share some of that stuff, because it really is changing, and there's new things being innovated, and it's nice to sort of, like Bruce had mentioned earlier, stay on top of some of that stuff. What about the Bay Mills folks? You guys have any sort of tapping patterns that you stick to, or you just kind of toss it wherever it looks good, or how do you make those decisions?
I guess I can talk first. I was telling you, we tapped in our bike trails, so we're still tapping in it. We're over 40 years later, so I haven't seen any effect. And I don't know if my brother Joe, since he did work for the Forest Service, saw any effect of the trees, but we're still using the same trees all these years. And I always make sure that we're not real close to the other one. I don't really have a pattern. I just make sure that I'm not close to the taps from previous years, because you could see where they are. And it hasn't seemed to, cause any troubles. I do have one sugar maple right in my yard here, and it's kind of grown up with me here, and I tap it every year, and I think it's doing fine. It's growing well. It's got a, nice big canopy on it. So I haven't seen that it's affected the tree at all. So I never thought about giving the trees a rest, because we don't have other trees that we can move on to, to tap. So we have to tap the ones that are there. So I never really noticed any effects of the tapping them every year, and we have every year. I don't know, Paul, if you have something to add to that.
No, you did good.
Okay. Yeah, and Joe must not be on here right now, because he might recognize something that, over the years, but I don't.
No, I rotate them around on the tree. And my big thing is how much snow's in the woods when I put them in. I don't like to put them too low to the ground, but
yeah,
I do go, I'll vary up and down within a foot distance and keep rotating them around one side of the tree, the other, and keep working them around. I never try and go within 2 or 3 inches of the year before, move it around. So, and again, we've been tapping the same trees. There's a couple trees I let go because their tops were starting to die back, and they're healing up good, and they put on a bigger crown now because some of the lower branches took over, and they got a bigger sunlight area now. So they'll be ready in another couple of years.
Yeah, that's something I think that we do as well. And, we talk about the relationship with those trees. And before we tap any one of those trees, we're always sort of doing like a quick assessment on those trees. And so we always, look up, kind of walk around the tree a little bit, make sure that that tree is healthy enough to share with us that season. If we are seeing that crown die back, or, there's a big wound on that tree or something like that, we know that tree is probably going to need that sap more than we do this year. So every year we're sort of analyzing those trees.
More than, but it only takes a 16th of
Is that Eric?
Just have to give a little.
I tap I tap most of the same trees every year. You know, with the tubing system, they recommend changing it out about every 15 years. And that's, you know, when you do have a good forest management plan, you'll find that you have a lot more crop trees that you could utilize. Industry standard is at least 4 inches off to the side and 6 inches up from any of your previous tap holes, is what I've read.
Yeah, typically you get what's called sap streak. And so wherever those vessel elements inside of the tree where it transports those fluids, when you create that hole, it basically starts walling that off. The tree looks at that as a wound. And so the trees are slow, so it takes a while for that to happen, but it'll start closing off those vessels. And that's why if you tap too close, you're hitting vessels that have been walled off by the trees. So that's why it's important to kind of bounce around and not tap right next to the one that you had tapped before. So I think with that, we should probably wrap it up. It's about 10 o'clock here. I know, you know, Bay Mills, you know, you guys are in the same time zone as well, and we don't want to take up too much time. So with that, I would just like to express my sincere gratitude for everyone that's participating. And it's cool to see that spread. You know, we got Michigan, Wisconsin, and Minnesota, Anishinaabe Waking represented here. And it's really nice to see that and to hear all the similarities and the stories and the things that everyone's been talking about. It's been really nice. I think moving forward now, we want to continue these conversations. We want to try to build a cohort if we can. I think Marnie had offered to sort of be the quarterback, I guess you could say, if people want to reach out, if people want to continue these conversations, maybe help with planning in the future. Like I said, we'd like to have a conference here in the future where we bring all these things to the table again, where we talk about the culture, where we talk about the language, we talk about the science, the technical aspect to everything that's going on. And we kind of have everyone together again to share this and try to perpetuate this tradition and bringing everyone along with us. So I don't know if there's much else to add. Katie?
Really want to just encourage you, Marnie's put the link to the evaluation up over on the chat a few times now. They fixed up the link. For those of you who aren't on the Zoom chat with us here, we're going to be able to email that out to everyone as well. I think they're going to try and get a link out in the Facebook for everyone. And just to continue to say miigwech apajay, like thank you so much to our guests tonight, those who were able to share the stories here. For those of you who might not have your questions answered, we encourage folks to reach out. The nice thing about having this group here is, you know, if you respond back to the evaluations, or if you get a hold of us, we'll be able to start sending you to the directions. Oh, you know, I want to go over to Bay Mills and see what Wanda and Paula and Joe are working on, or oh, I'm up near Grand Portage here, and maybe I can go spend some time with Eric and River and the folks who are working out that way. And Matt, you know, Bruce is always looking for more slave labor, so we'll send all of you out over to Minnesota there.
Send the kids here first, actually.
And so we're really continuing to encourage everyone to maintain this relationship, or begin this relationship, and see where it takes you.
And moving forward together as a nation again. I know everyone has their specific things that they do in certain areas, but you know, we're all Anishinaabe here, and we can help each other again, and you know, start rebuilding again. And I think there's a lot of power in that, and for the future generations, and for climate change and all these uncertainties that we're going to be facing together. The more information that we have, the better for everyone. I mean, and that goes for non-natives too. You know, we're all in this together, so we want to keep this place capable of taking care of our people. So
Right.
miigwech. And I don't know if anyone else wants to jump on or has any last thoughts or anything else they'd like to share. Feel free to do that now, or any of the other moderators, or people that have mic access, feel free to jump on now. It's a free for all.
10 o'clock. Bonjour, Brizette from Ontario.
Oh, there's Frank.
My name Frank.
This is Frank Edowagishik, and I just wanted to say thank you for this. I appreciate it. I've worked a lot on climate change, and I know that that's been an issue for us, but I also have heard here throughout this evening about how people love the trees and take care of the trees. And I know that the trees respond to that. And we're going to be able to keep the trees healthier if we're paying attention to them. And if we're not, they'll be going away. And that's the part of the problem with what's happening with climate change right now. And I see people doing things in a way that are really healthy. And I think that's part of the strength of our traditional ways is to pay attention to all of those food plants, the medicine plants, all the things around us and those other beings. So it's been really great to hear everybody speak here about all their experiences. And I really appreciate it. Miigwech.
Miigwech, Frank. Marnie, do you want to sign us off, or anyone else? Rob, if you're still with us, or if you're sleeping or not yet. Hannah, anyone else want to say anything?
I'm looking at Eric and I'm thinking it must be his bedtime soon. Thanks for sharing, everybody. I don't know, this is really wonderful. We kind of threw it together and said we're gonna learn more once we execute, and we certainly did tonight. But I can't thank you guys enough for spending the time and sharing what you know. Rob, anything to add? Hannah?
Really nothing other than, Miigwech, all the panelists, Jerry and Katie. We couldn't have done it without all you guys. It's been wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jerry and Katie. I'm up in Grand Marais with Greg, right there, and Alex. And just my relationship to all of you guys has been so powerful. And thank you guys for coming down and helping us start our Sugar Bush in Detroit. And I've just appreciated this roundtable and getting to know more people. And come check us out in Detroit if you guys are interested. If you're down that way, our season starts much earlier than your guys'. We're gonna start putting in taps, I think, next week. So just thank you guys, everybody. Much love. Look forward to seeing you in person.
Oh, Miigwech, Antonio, thank you for that. And heads up for everyone up north, we're typically about 2 weeks behind what's going on down by Detroit. So like Marvin was saying, start getting your firewood dusted off and get your taps cleaned up, because it's almost go time. Appreciate that, Antonio. Anyone else?
Miigwech then. Miigwech Apajay. We'll say good night to you for now. And anyone got any naughty kids they need worked out, send them to me. My job. All right, Miigwech Kakanoia. We'll see you all soon, hopefully. And just remember, even with COVID-19, you can totally social distance in the woods. All right,
Truth.
y'all.
Yeah, Miigwech.
Mama P. Gigawamin.
Man, Minoa.
Mama P.
Mama P.